very effectively with a very sharp electronic knife. Do we have a question from this side? Colleen, do you see someone with a hand? Can you identify yourself and place your question to one or the other to start?
James Heffernan. Just a quick comment on that. The point that Mr. Hertzberg just made is exacerbated the fact that in order to win in a district that is effectively owned by one party or another, you must run to the right or the left of your opponent. That is to say, you run to the extremes. You're trying to appeal to the base. This is part of the problem. Apropos the point about representing geographical areas, I totally agree. The problem is that you'd have to change the Constitution. You have a Constitution created as a compromise between the rural areas and the highly populated eastern areas. And I cannot imagine those rural areas giving up their 2 sentiments for the sake of harmony. I mean, it would be wonderful if it could happen.
No, you don't. That's right. You'd have to. In fact, you'd have to do it through. It could be done in theory through a constitutional convention. What surprises me is that no state has done it. You know, the representation used in most of the world is proportional representation, and if it's like the Germans, in our system, a minority can be represented if it can get a majority or a plurality in a particular geographic area. So you could get 15% of the vote, I guess. Is that what Ross Perot got? Something 19% of the vote, and you don't get anything. But in a European country, you get roughly 19 or 20% of the seats in the parliament. So you could be a minority of 7 or 8% in the country, and you can be part of the system. You can get represented. Your views can be represented in the national legislature. Here, it's only a regional minority that can get represented. But what surprised me is that no state has experimented with the other forms of democracy. That every state government is a mindless copy of the federal government with a president or governor and 2 houses of the legislature, which is utterly pointless since the one man, one vote decision to have the 2 houses.
Nebraska the only one.
Nebraska's the only one, and that's a fairly modest experiment to have 1 house legislature. Nobody's tried a parliamentary system, which you could do. I mean, a state could do it. A state could do it by itself. That's what I keep waiting for. I keep waiting for some really eccentric millionaire with a really large amount of money to come in and finance a ballot initiative in California, turning California into a European-style democracy. That's what I think. And then we can see how it works in our own.
Its economy is becoming a European-style.
So lucky.
We've got another question on this side.
Yes.
Well, I guess you never lived in a parliamentary democracy. They are constantly worried about being held hostage to the small party that has 5 seats, and nobody can get a coalition without them. But that aside, the issue when you have a democracy, you have a competition for power, which therefore your main goal is always to show what the government did wrong. If the government is doing right, why should they kick the bastards out and put you instead in? So therefore, it's naturally what you have is a tendency to emphasize the negative in a democracy. And therefore, what I'm going to is that I see in today's elites, and I include the Yale and Harvard graduates amongst them, and they will constantly have this kind of feeling that, oh, if only we could get rid of those masses and have a nice autocracy that makes the trains run on time. And I see the same kind of thinking coming out underneath in magazines as it was in the 1930s. Right now, people looking at China and saying, isn't it wonderful? And I would like to challenge the 2 of you to come up with reasons to opt for democracy in a positive fashion.
I don't think that there's anything wonderful about China. There's the food. About the way that mainland China is run, and it's a kind of a grotesque imitation of capitalism, which is in large part Communist Party cronyism, and unbelievable if you're the wrong ethnicity, too bad. I mean, it's just that there is a sort of curse of China worship, which is sort of like the Japan worship we had in the 80s, but more ignoble, because Japan was a better place than communist China is, certainly. We want something affirmative about democracy, and it expresses our rights as men. And, you know, Mr. Jefferson, whose city we are in, he said no one comes into the world booted and spurred so that he should ride on the backs of other humans. I'm saying it, I'm angling the quotation, and of course Jefferson said it much better than I did. But that's the reason. It's because of the equality of all men, that all men are created equal, in the sense that no man can legitimately domineer over another. That's why we have it. That's the reality that it expresses. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I quibble with the idea that there's that either on the American right or the American left there's any sympathy for China, for the Chinese way of government.
Just Tom Friedman.
Yeah, that's right. A little bit. But here's why I'm in favor of democracy, because of legitimacy, for two reasons: liberty and legitimacy. It's the only way you can have a government that isn't kind of structurally a tyranny. That's the consent of the government. That makes it legitimate. And it seems to be the form of government that is best suited to guaranteeing the liberties that I believe are important: the freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. These things seem to exist only when there's a democracy. You cannot really argue, though, that democracies, well, maybe you can argue it, but I might dispute it, that democracies make wiser decisions on a day-to-day basis. I don't think the people are any smarter than any other random subset of the people or a non-random subset of the people. They have no great wisdom, and so it makes my blood boil when I hear over and over and over again on TV chat shows, well, the American people think blah, blah, blah. The American people this, the American people that. There is no such thing. There are American people, but there is no the American people. And democracy, to the extent that democracy becomes about this valorization of the people, I'm probably more of a Buckleyite on that one than I really ought to be.